Karthik Ramesh. I'm the Global Head for Innovation and International Markets for a leading healthcare multinational company which is headquartered in United States of America. And I take care of India and Middle East. I've had stints at Infosys, Dun & Bradstreet, and various other companies like Standard Chartered Bank, where I've driven large billion-dollar transformations. Quick trivia, and I'll pass it on. I'm also the great-grandson of the founder of BITS Pilani, Professor V. Lakshmi Narayanan, who is my great-grandfather. And I would like to dedicate this moment to him, especially in the line of this topic. Thank you so much.
You're talking about humanity, you're talking about life, servicing life, but it could be totally different in an entertainment industry, where the mindset is totally different. So with these thoughts, I'm going to open this discussion for all our guests, probably starting with you, Dr. Karthik Ramesh, and probably you could establish it from your context, your industry, and it's better to have good perspective on this.
Thank you, Mr. Samir. I think it was a phenomenal opening in terms of setting the context, in terms of preparing the ground for a very vibrant discussion with my fellow panelists. I'm going to recall, I can't help sounding like a management guru. Another bit of trivia, I'm a bit of a storyteller. Of the various things I've done in my career, one thing is I'm possibly one of the most qualified Indians here in terms of the number of degrees I have. I've learned management in various IITs and IIMs, almost 15 IIMs I have degrees. And when I went through this process in the last 20 years of upskilling myself with these degrees, I realized that companies today, or institutes of education also today, focus more on what I call as the triple victory model. If you can visualize this, you have values at the apex of the pyramid, and then you have the valuation. It could be individual valuation, say you're coming out of an industry, or you're coming out of, say, a management school or a tech school, anywhere in the world. And then you have value. And I think very beautifully Mr. Samir touched upon all three aspects and brought a fundamental question. So I want you to please visualize this in your mind. Values at the apex of the pyramid, valuation and value, right? Now put yourself, each of you rewind your own past to your education. When you joined a particular institute, or when you went to your first job, when you're looking for the next opportunity, we typically tend to look at what is the valuation, how is this going to increase my value, how am I going to be evaluated by the market, right? Tomorrow, I'm sure many leaders in this group and also in this panel, eminent people who are leading, who have led large companies, have always had top line as the focus. Wearing the hat now of like a management thinker, if I can call myself so, Harvard Business Review talks about fundamentally what Mr. Samir touched upon, the who we really are. And that is the quiddity. That is a word in Harvard Business Review which was published in 2021, a paper on what is a fundamental purpose an organization exists. And that mirrors or correlates very closely to values, which is the first aspect of this discussion. We have seen companies succeed, grow exponentially, and reach, traverse the S-curve to great heights of success. But one tipping point, or one small slip in terms of values, you've seen profitability go down, you've seen growth go down. We've seen that happen day in and day out around us. So very essentially for me, I would say that companies need to, therefore going back to this pyramid, which one of my researches was around this, on what I call the victory model, 3 V's, so V3 or victory. The values need to be strong. Albert Einstein said that it's important not to be a man of success, but it's important to be a man of values or virtue. My first job, and after this I'll pass on to the fellow panelists because I'm very keen to hear their views, was with Infosys, and Mr. Narayan was the CEO of Infosys. And he used to say that the company's valuation every day, and at that time I was possibly the 18,000th employee of the company, starting my career 25 years back. He said the valuation of the company increases every day in the morning when all employees are at work and decreases to 0 when they leave by evening. Because essentially, as their tagline also said, powered by intellect, driven by values. You see the Tata's group. You see all the large business houses which have actually made a dent, who have sustained the growth, are companies which have emphasized on this values. Not to kind of reduce the importance of profitability and growth. These are very important parameters. This is the barometer to success. But if a company loses focus on values, the remaining two are so tightly correlated and coupled that it will lead to a collapse of even the largest organization. With this, I will pass it on to my fellow panelists. Thank you. Especially when you are an investor, or you're an owner, or you're the CEO. I'm reminded of few interesting anecdotes and quotes, and let me try to quickly summarize that. We've all read the cliched statement of Peter Drucker, who says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. But today I'll say culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert also. Right? End of the day, as Samir beautifully put it, talking the walk, walking the talk. Right? So, what's the best place to see the values implemented in a company is actually the way employees are perceiving those values. How are they seeing the not only about how employees perceive the boardroom or the investors or the CEOs or CXOs walking the talk, but typically organizations have this water cooler conversations. And a few years back, I worked with Stanford Research Institute on a very interesting project which they had done, where they studied, when you talk about, for example, in this panel, you talk about value. Suppose you want to measure the value of a team in terms of how innovative it is. There are so many entrepreneurs who are sitting here today. So Stanford Research Institute found that every team or every group of people go through what is called a climate of innovation. Innovation is not just a culture of it. A lot of companies, as Sami was talking even about mission, core values, vision, we have some beautiful hoardings and posters all over the company, reiterating it to employees. Similarly for innovation, ideate, innovate, incubate, become the best entrepreneur, right? But we have to remember, and Stanford Research Institute found that the kind of human values which fundamentally existed in a team. Now this team could be two founders, a founder and a co-founder. It could be a founder and a set of employees. It could be a new group of interns who have joined the company. If you wanted to measure in all of these different situations, how innovative this team would become, what was the peak of their innovation, Stanford Research Institute came up with a mapping of 36 attributes of fundamental human values. Kindness, compassion, sharing, caring. And it may sound very basic, but at the end of the day, and thanks to my friend there who's doing such an amazing job, in inspiring so many entrepreneurs. I reminded of a Sanskrit verse, and my grandfather, 93-year-old grandfather, used to tell this. He was an army veteran who turned into a radio businessman, an entrepreneur around 50 years back, but the entire business became so loss-making because wherever he would go, if he saw somebody suffering, he would even remove his shirt and give it to them, right? If he found a poor person. And he taught this to me in childhood. The Sanskrit verse says, Parupkaraya idam shariram. The fundamental existence of a human body is to help others. And if you see what the pandemic taught us, right? We talk about pandemic accelerating transformation, digitalization. Every company now says, pandemic forced us, to become innovative. Now the pandemic taught us how volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous the world today we live in is. But the pandemic also showed a very good side of humanity. We saw so many people come together to help each other. At the peak of the pandemic, when I switched from a multinational bank, a Standard Chartered bank, this bank is, example of many multinational banks today who actually try to, for example, give back to environment through carbon credits. Today, businesses are saying, values is not just about the culture of the company, but how are you impacting the society, the environment. We talk about the triple bottom line. The people, the planet, it's not just about the company, employees and extended families. So banks are today investing, financial houses are investing in companies which are carbon neutral, which are not going to continue to emit carbon. So when I moved from the bank to healthcare and the COVID pandemic happened, I was lucky to be a mentor of almost 8 global hackathons. In a span of 3 months, advising right from Silicon Valley, Government of Canada, European Union, United Nations, IBM, SAP, and the Government of India, which ran 3 hackathons. What stunned me was, the impact of the pandemic in terms of innovative thinking was at its peak. Even before, we saw these sanitizers, we saw these UV sanitizers, for example, or even somebody spoke about the mask the first time when World Health Organization spoke about it as a protective equipment. Many of these solutions I could see way back in March 2020, when the pandemic was spreading across the world, was actually being crowdsourced by students and universities, by people who are at house. These are not rocket scientists, these are not technologists. These are people who wanted to make a difference to the world. These are people who wanted to save lives. We have many doctors in this audience and at the panel. So, people who fundamentally want to make a difference at an individual level will create this at scale. Going back to the point which Samir asked, how do you scale as an organization to talk about all this? But unless the transformation happens at an individual level, there's a famous quote again, and I'll end with this. When you point a finger to something in the company not working, oh, this company is only profitable focused, it is only growth focused, it is not values. We'll have to remember 3 fingers are pointing to us. So what are we going to do as individuals? And therefore companies today don't talk about corporate social responsibility, they talk about an individual social. So it starts with us, and let's make that difference. Thank you.